As far as Carlos Curbelo is concerned, way back in January, when the Attorney General rescinded the Cole and Ogden memos, what was your initial reaction?
Extreme disappointment. I had a lot of faith that the president wanted to keep his promise during the campaign,
Right.
that he would leave this issue to the states, which is where it belongs.
Right.
And I wouldn't say I was necessarily surprised, given the Attorney General's history on the issue and his past statements. But many people are under the impression that he acted unilaterally and really without any kind of strong support or indications from the White House. So
many people like me, or many people here in Washington?
No, here in Washington too. I mean, there's a strong bipartisan majority here in the Congress that rejects that decision and that supports rational policies regarding marijuana.
Some of those are the Rohrabacher-Blumenauer amendment. You have signed on to that. The McClintock-Polis amendment, you've signed on to that. Just share with us your thoughts regarding each of those amendments, one which is in place, one which will hopefully be.
Well, these amendments are about federalism. They're about states' rights. They're about the federal government staying out of state affairs. And the fact is that we have dozens of states in this country, including mine, Florida, where 71% of voters voted to amend the Constitution to allow medical marijuana. And those states are sovereign, and the people of those states are sovereign, and they should be treated as such. So because the federal government still has an irrational policy set when it comes to marijuana, cannabis, that's why we support these appropriations amendments that would defund any enforcement action having to do with, in one case, medical marijuana, and the other case, adult use marijuana in states that have approved it.
You are not only supporting states' rights in your conversation that you're having with me, but you're demonstrating a level of knowledge that not necessarily many members of Congress have. Why is this an issue that you care about beyond the states' rights?
Well, I got into this issue from a tax angle. I'm on the Ways and Means Committee. That's the committee that handles all tax policy here on the House side. And Section 280E first caught my attention and said, how come if you're a legal licensed business in a state, the federal tax code discriminates against you by not allowing you to deduct your business expenses? So that was my foray into this marijuana issue. And for a long time, that's all I was focused on. But as I learned more about the issue, I decided to become active more broadly in all of the different laws that address marijuana in the United States. And that's why I took these positions. And I really believe that the more we educate members here on both sides, but especially on the Republican side where we have more room for growth, the more we educate members, the more will sign on to these, common sense changes to the law that will actually help us regulate this substance, keep it away from children, which no one wants to see, and put all the illegal drug dealers out of business.
Without question.
So this is such an obvious issue, and I really think we're just so close to having a major breakthrough here where a bipartisan majority is allowed to act in favor of a more logical policy set.
We're on the precipice of a major breakthrough. Is that specific, or is that a general feeling that you have?
I'd say it's a general feeling, but I think that the Attorney General's action in January has actually helped strengthen our coalition here and has drawn a lot of attention to the issue. And a lot of Republicans, mostly libertarian-leaning and centrist Republicans, are now speaking up and saying, a lot of us haven't focused on this issue in the past, but now there's an urgency, and we want to do the right thing by so many states and so many voters who have made a choice, by so many patients throughout this country that rely on some of these products for their well-being. We're learning more and more about the potential benefits every day. The opioid crisis in the United States is a hot topic here in Congress, and it turns out some studies are now showing that medical marijuana can be an off-ramp for those who are addicted to opioids. So people are learning so much here every day. I've had a lot of one-on-one conversations. There's a lot of distractions in Washington, D.C. There's a news bomb every 2 or 3 days. But more and more members are paying attention to this issue, and more they are signing on to some of the ideas that we think are common sense.
What about 280E? What is possible within the year of 2018? Is it possible that we actually get something done?
I think there is a possibility. We know that over on the Senate, there's a clear bipartisan effort associated with this here in the House, too. But with Cory Gardner and Rand Paul working with senators like Ron Wyden and others, we have a real chance. And here on the House side, our legislation has dozens of co-sponsors. A lot of Republicans. I think we're up to 16. I have to double check that number, but
go ahead and name it. The 280E bill.
Well, it's the tax parity, Small Business Tax Parity Act, and it's what the title says. We just want fairness for entrepreneurs that are operating legally, that have licenses in their states, and that today are paying an effective tax rate between 80 and 90%. I mean, it's impressive these people
that they stay
in
business.
Yeah. I don't know too many businesses that could survive at that rate, and it's just wrong. It's fundamentally unfair. It's outdated. It was a law that was passed at a time when obviously there were no legal marijuana businesses.
You're talking about the Controlled Substances Act, 1970.
That's right, in the country. So it needs some updating. We have...
you said 16 total members, or is that
total Republicans?
How many total members?
I think it's over 40. I haven't.
All right, so
we get new people every
darn
week.
near 10% of the entire Congress right there.
That's right, and importantly, we have a lot of Ways and Means Committee members, because this is, I know a lot of people view it as a marijuana issue, but it's really a tax issue.
Indeed.
And we have 3 Republicans on the committee who have signed on, many others who are quietly supportive. So there's a lot of hope and a pretty decent chance that we can make progress on this issue.
How can we get it to a vote?
Well, we need to get more Republicans to sign on, and I work on that here every day.
Okay. And
we also need our friends in the Senate, where you need 60 votes to do almost everything to really make this a priority.
As far as your messaging, so that we can kind of further that messaging, when you speak one-on-one to your fellow Republicans, as far as 280E is concerned, beyond what you've already shared, what else do you say?
First topic, 10th Amendment. The Republican Party is the party of the 10th Amendment.
Indeed.
And a lot of members understand that argument and sympathize with it. And then the next argument is, if we really want to get tough on drug dealers, on the criminal element that's involved in the drug trade, those who target anyone, including children, who don't pay any taxes, if we want to put them out of business, this is the way to do it, by embracing these policies. And on the other hand, if we refuse to embrace this policy agenda, we are actually supporting this criminal element. We are strengthening criminal organizations all over the Americas, not just in our country, but all throughout Central America and South America. These are people who kidnap, who murder.
These are criminals.
And our laws keep them in business. Our laws really make them stronger every day. So,
especially with Canada legalizing and Mexico decriminalizing, we're the only ones keeping them in business. Essentially.
Exactly. So when you make that argument to a lot of Republican colleagues, they really start thinking.
Start to think.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
that's right.
Let's just make sure while we have you here, what are some of the other issues that kind of drive you? Why did you put yourself in this situation where you have to be a congressman?
Don't make me think about that too much.
Right.
So obviously, being on the Ways and Means Committee, all the big issues that we have jurisdiction over: tax, trade, all of our welfare programs, Social Security, about half of Medicare. So I focus a lot on that. But then off committee, important issues to me: immigration. I come from an immigrant family. I come from an immigrant-rich community.
Yeah.
We have so much work to do in this country to reform our immigration laws, to welcome DACA recipients, those young immigrants who are brought to this country as children, make sure they have a path forward in this country, that we can secure a future for them in this country. Also, big for me personally and for my district is environmental policy. Most people are by now familiar with the concept of sea level rise, driven by climate change and specifically carbon emissions. And I represent the Florida Keys, where most people live at about sea level and near the sea. So this issue of sea level rise is important. And I'm very passionate about trying to reform our laws and get our country to a place where environmental policy can be bipartisan as well. So I oftentimes find myself trying to bridge the gap between both parties on issues like the environment, like immigration, and also marijuana.
Yeah, as I speak to younger members of Congress, I am starting to hear this kind of, it doesn't sound like either left or right. It sounds like solutions.
That's right. And that's solutions is the word. As a matter of fact, on the environment, we have a bipartisan climate solutions caucus. That's evenly Republican and Democrat. We have 70 members now, over 70 members. And what I'm noticing, which you've noticed as well as an observer from the outside, is that the new generation of members that are coming in, Republican and Democrat, we don't buy into this zero-sum game mentality, the us versus them mentality. Even on a very difficult issue here, like gun safety policies, I've partnered with Seth Moulton, a Democrat from Massachusetts, to just introduce legislation banning bump stocks, doing things that most Americans agree with.
Right.
And it is frustrating because this is a Congress still dominated by baby boomers, by older members. There's a lot more gray hair than black or blonde or brown hair in
I can tell you're a politician, by the way, because you didn't call them senior citizens. You called them baby boomers.
Well, right. But I do worry for that generation that their political legacy is going to be this divisiveness and just lack of cooperation on issues. And I find that maybe with just very few exceptions, all of the under 40s who are here, the under 45s, we just reject that.
Yeah.
We want to work together. We don't like that oftentimes our leaders try to prevent us from finding that bipartisan consensus.
One of the things I did not understand when it happened, you mentioned caucus, the Hispanic caucus voting against letting you, it did not make sense to me.
Thanks for reminding me of that.
As an American, what?
Yeah, this was odd. Just so that listeners know, there's an organization here in the Congress called the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. It is for Hispanic Americans who serve in Congress. And in their mission statement, it says that they're a bipartisan organization. Well, there are only Democrats in that caucus. And at the beginning of this Congress, I decided that it should truly be a bipartisan caucus and that I really wanted to work together with my fellow Hispanic members of Congress who happen to be Democrats on issues like immigration, education, and others. So I applied to join. They didn't give me a response for months. Finally, when it kind of became public that this was going on, they started trying to figure out how to handle this. And late last year, they voted to deny me,
Yeah.
admission to the caucus, which I told them at the time. I said, what you've done for the institution of the House is horrible. What you've done for the caucus is horrible, because the message is that unless you're a Hispanic Democrat, you don't count. Hispanic Republicans, Hispanic independents are irrelevant to this group. And that's a big mistake, because one of the things that they advocate for is diversity.
Indeed.
And an inclusive society that includes
Diversity
Hispanic
of
Americans.
thoughts.
Well, if they truly embrace and support diversity, that includes diversity of thought. And
Right.
I really believe that any Hispanic that wants to join that organization, no matter their party affiliation or their position on certain bills, should be allowed to join. And the truth is, we have a lot more in common than what divides us. But this is a perfect example of people in this institution putting petty politics above desire to truly work together and advance an agenda that most Americans can get behind. It's a shame.
Yeah.
And I told them I'm going to keep trying to join.
That's great. I support
just
that.
Wrong.
I think that's fantastic.
Thank you.
They did cite, or it was cited, your Affordable Care, Act position was cited essentially as a big reason. What is that position, so we understand it?
My position is that our country deserves better than the status quo on health care.
I think we can all agree on
And
that.
even though that bill was not perfect, there were actually a lot of portions of it that I really didn't like.
Yeah.
There were some ideas in there that I thought, and that I still think, have a lot of merit. For example, we wanted to empower every American by giving them advanceable refundable tax credits, meaning a monthly cash benefit from the government, so that with those funds, they could go out and buy their own healthcare policies, as opposed to the government just deciding these are the healthcare policies you can choose, and you really don't have any power to we're not going to treat you as a consumer. We're just going to pay for you. Well, we wanted to turn every American into a healthcare consumer, so that with their dollars, of course, with the support of the government, for those who were lower income, they could go out to the marketplace and become consumers and say, well, this is the policy that works best for me and for my family. I don't like this other one. Yeah. Anyway, but back to the point of this caucus, just because we have a different view on healthcare policy doesn't mean that we can't sit around the same table and work together on other issues.
Quickly on that point, though, how important is taking down the state walls, as far as, healthcare in the United States of America? The fact that I can't buy something in New Jersey if I'm in New York, a plan offered to me from New Jersey, doesn't that, spike prices right there?
That's right. So that idea of allowing competition across state lines would help.
Yeah.
There is no panacea. There is no magical solution to healthcare, but there are a number of things that we can do.
Iterative changes
that would make the healthcare system more affordable, more accessible, and improve quality.
Yeah.
One of my big issues in healthcare is price transparency. Healthcare is, I think, the only product that you can try to purchase, and when you ask how much it costs, they'll tell you either they don't know, or they'll say it depends.
Right.
I mean, imagine if you go to the grocery store and you want to buy apples and say, well, we don't know how much it costs. Take it, and you'll get a bill later. And by the way, someone else will pay it. You don't even have to pay it.
I'm laughing, but that's exactly what the system is.
It is totally convoluted.
Yeah.
There's a lot of waste. There are a lot of, I call them the healthcare incumbents, the powerful organizations in healthcare, big hospitals, big insurance, pharmaceuticals, that really don't support this concept of a true marketplace. Those of us who did Economics 101 in school, we know that in order for a true market to exist, we need information.
Indeed.
Consumers need to know.
Milton Friedman will tell you, right?
Well, that's right. And if I don't know how much something costs, I'm lost. I'm hopeless as a consumer. So anyway, that's something that I think is very important in healthcare as well.
Speaking of costs, so as far as budget is concerned, we just had the tax bill that passed, which brought the corporate rate down and other rates as well. We all know or can see how the corporate rate kind of puts us in better competition with other countries. As far as the deficit, as far as the debt, really, I know that you're a big budget guy, or excuse me, not a big budget guy.
Well, that's correct.
And so, how do you square, that tax bill with what it does to the debt and what we actually need to do here in terms of spend?
So I'm 38 years old. So this issue of our national debt, it really concerns me because a lot of times you hear politicians here in Congress say, oh, we're worried about our children and our grandchildren. Well, I'm worried. Sure, I have 2 daughters. They're 8 and 6. I'm worried about them, but I'm really worried about myself first, because this if we don't address this, it's going to affect all of us here in the pretty near future. So the tax bill, obviously, adding about $1 trillion, assuming that we don't get even greater growth. If we get really strong growth, an average of 3% per year for the next 10 years, then it will not add at all to the debt.
Right.
But current estimates are that it could add about $1 trillion, and obviously that just means that we must have an even greater urgency now to address our fiscal sustainability as a country, and tax policy is a part of that. But we know that mandatory spending is the big issue. Now almost 80% of our federal budget is mandatory spending. That means Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. And what I've always said is, for current beneficiaries and those near retirement, we need to keep the promise, no changes. On the contrary, strengthen the system to make sure we can fulfill those promises.
Sure.
For people in my generation, we really need to reimagine these programs, because otherwise they're not going to be around for us. And I want to, I pay into Social Security every month.
Sure.
My wife does. All
Raising
of our
the
friends
age
do.
Seems to be such an easy thing to do, right?
We are living so much longer.
Right.
What a blessing. But obviously that means we have to change some of these programs. My grandmother passed away last year at 95. So, amazing. Awesome. What a life. Blessing for her to live 95 years. But that means that she drew from these programs for over 30 years. So we really need to redesign these programs so that they fit the new reality. And I'm committed to doing that. And that's what's going to truly help solve the issue of our national debt. And tax policy can be a part of that. But tax policy and cutting discretionary spending, that's just kind of working around the edges.
Also,
the real problem
I'd like to throw in defense here, because, the next 10 countries, we dwarf them.
That's right.
And I understand that China and Russia might be spending money that we can't see, but still,
on defense, we need to spend smarter.
Right.
We can never take for granted that we have the strongest military in the world.
Sure.
There's a great value in having that. It's impossible to quantify how important that is.
That's the big stick that's
our big
Teddy
insurance
Roosevelt.
policy.
Yeah, exactly.
But there is a lot of waste at DOD. John McCain, who's one of the greatest advocates for DOD on the Hill for years, has been raging against the inefficiencies and some of the wasteful spending there. And Secretary Mattis has agreed to address that. Yeah. So yes, all of this is part of the puzzle. But again, the central issue when it comes to the debt is our mandatory spending. Again, almost 80% of what we spend every year.
We could spend the rest of the day talking about that. Unfortunately, you don't have that kind of time. So we've got 3 final questions for you. I'll tell you what they are, and I'll ask you them in order.
Okay.
First question is, what has most surprised you in cannabis? Second question is, what's most surprised you in life? And the third question is, on the soundtrack of your life, one track, one song that's got to be on there. But first things first, what's most surprised you in cannabis?
So as I've really gotten to know the industry and a lot of the companies, I've been so impressed by the degree of sophistication that these executives have. I think just a few years ago, and for some still today, there was this perception of the industry that it was really not sophisticated. People who maybe didn't understand business.
Yeah,
were
not
just,
if you meet them.
Exactly.
Right.
And these a lot of the people in the industry were actually very successful in other industries, and to get to know them has really kind of just educated or helped me form my opinion of the industry. And I always tell them, make sure you go and meet with other members, because I assure you, especially some of our more senior colleagues have a perception of the industry, maybe what it was 10, 15 years ago, that is just completely off. So definitely just the degree of professionalism, the commitment to really regulating the product. I mean, these people take very seriously all the protocols, the rules that each state have in place. They work tirelessly to make sure they not just meet those standards, but exceed them. So again, a wonderful example of how we can take this substance, really use it to benefit society, and keep it away from those who shouldn't have any access to it.
Absolutely. What's most surprised you in life?
Surprised me in life? I'll tell you, and I think about this maybe once a month here. I am the son of refugees, people who came to this country poor, had to leave everything in their homeland, Cuba, really didn't speak good English, and they just started working and were able to make a life here. And then just one generation after that, their child can serve in Congress. That is just
remarkable,
fascinating.
Yeah.
And I think of that phrase, what a country, what a country where that can happen. Not too many countries in the world would open those kinds of doors for newcomers.
Just quickly, how do we look at immigration as a solution as opposed to a problem? Because there's a lot of rhetoric out there that immigration and immigrants are the problem. How do we just...
Yeah, and that's just ridiculous. Immigration is not just a solution, it's necessary. Think about our country. If we had shut the doors 100 years ago, we would not be the most powerful, dynamic country in the world. Nope. Not even close.
Wouldn't have, by the way, we wouldn't have Facebook, we wouldn't have Google, we wouldn't have
Nothing.
Apple.
Today, our economy is growing. I give our tax bill some credit for that. It was already growing, but I think we've just kind of doubled down on that growth, and people are feeling better. Wages are going up. That means we need more people, right? Unemployment is so low.
Right.
There's going to be so many new job opportunities in this country, and we need people to fill those jobs. So immigration, it's not a problem. It's not even a solution. It is a necessity. It is the lifeblood of this country. Now, that doesn't mean that we just say anyone who wants, come on in anytime. It has to be ordered.
Gotta have
rules.
Has
to be controlled. Yeah. We should try to shift our immigration system a little more towards an economy-based immigration, because we have a lot of positions in our economy that are going unfilled.
Yeah.
So that's all fine. We need to debate all of that. But the idea that immigrants are the problem in this country, that's antithetical to who we are as a country.
On the soundtrack of your life, one track, one song that's got to be on there.
Soundtrack of my life. That's tough. I don't know. I have this really strange, eclectic,
but like Tito Puente, Celia Cruz, certainly, right? Anything off the
Pitbull?
Oh, sure, Mr. Worldwide, right?
Celia Cruz, azúcar, that was her signature line, sugar, and
right.
I don't know. I guess today I'm just in the mood to say she's got a song called La vida es un carnaval. Life is a carnival. I'll choose to honor my roots, Celia Cruz, today. La vida es un carnaval.
I love it.
You kind of need to think that way in Congress to
That's
stay
fantastic.
sane and happy.
Absolutely. Hey, listen, understanding that I follow Groucho Marx and saying that anyone that would have me as a member, any group that would have me as a member, I don't want to be a part of. Understanding that's my position, please keep trying to join that Hispanic caucus. I'm not kidding.
I'm going to do it. Thank you. I really enjoyed it. Let's do it again.
And there you have Congressman Carlos Curbelo. Very much appreciate his time. Very much appreciate yours. Stay tuned.